Chapter 7 Virginia, Here I Come. Following previously unsuccessful excursions aimed at settlement, the first in Newfoundland in 1583 by Sir Humphrey Gilbert, and the second later that decade in modern-day North Carolina on Roanoke Island by Sir Walter Raleigh, King James Charles Stewart I and VI attempted colonization yet again, issuing charters to the Virginia Company of London, England. On their behalf, Captain John Smith founded the Virginia colony in 1606, and the following year the first settlement was established. Of all the Crown's attempts to colonize North America, Virginia becomes the first to endure and thrive. As the first of the original 13 colonies, it is named in honor of Queen Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. The road out of Newcastle, Delaware Colony, an early spring morning, 1729. William is off to begin a new chapter, and while his belly is full of food and his pouch is lined with hard-earned shillings, it is his mind that is overflowing with visions of Virginia, what it might look like, and what he might find when he gets there. The thought that it will be anything less than what Mr. Davies described never enters the equation, for during their time together he came to respect Mr. Davies. So when he offered his advice, William listened closely and took it to heart, his words repeating in his head, "Virginia, that's where your future lies." With his bedroll across his coat-covered back and Senior's trusty knife at his side, he heads south. The king's first colony is well over 100 miles away, so he will have to cover a lot of ground and make several stops along the way. With this in mind, he is determined to take it one adventurous day at a time, the first leg of which takes him 11 miles west to Newark, a small Delaware settlement founded by a group of Scottish, Irish, and Welsh in 1694. Although unincorporated, its future is destined for greater things, for it is the very place where on September 3rd, 1777, during the Battle of Couch's Bridge, General Washington's Patriots raised Old Glory for the very first time. It will also become home to 3 signers of the Declaration of Independence, George Read, Thomas McKean, and James Smith. Later still, it will become the home of the University of Delaware. As William makes his way through the tiny settlement, there was very little for him to see. What he does see, however, is a trading post and, thankfully for his growling gut, a tavern, the aroma from which leads him like a Pied Piper. Minutes later, he is sitting in front of a bowl of stew and resting his weary feet. While enjoying his meal, a couple of men standing at the bar spot him eating alone, both with burly salt-and-pepper beards and clad in buckskins, each topped with a furry winter hat. When William makes eye contact with them, they walk over and stand across the table from him staring. Keeping his head, William stares them down, but continues eating. Pointing first to himself and then to his partner, one of the men says, "May we join you?" The man's Irish accent is familiar to William, so he stops eating and eyeballs them as they cop a squat on the bench across from him. Leaning in close, the first man whispers, "You ought not eat alone in a place like this, lad." Shoveling a spoonful of stew into his mouth, William glares at him curiously. Then the other stranger says, "Aye, people might get the idea you're traveling alone," his voice fading to a whisper as he finishes. William rests his spoon in the bowl. With a wave of his hand, the first man says, "Finish eating, lad. We're no here to rob you." Scanning the room, the second man says, "Nay, we're here to warn ya. Dark eyes be watching." Peering to his left and right, the first man adds, "Aye, nefarious souls, the likes of which we keeps an eye out for." With crossed eyes and a cutthroat gesture, his partner adds, lest we ends up dead." William watches with a raised brow. Seeing William is a little uneasy, the first brawny stranger extends a hand. "Paul McCarthy." William stops eating and they shake. As they finish their handshake, McCarthy smacks his partner on the chest with the back of his hand and billows, "And this here's me partner, James Kennedy." The young Irishman reaches out and shakes his hand. "William, pleased to meet you, Mr. Kennedy." With a slow raise of his right brow, Kennedy asks, "William? William what?" "Albin. William Bruce Albin." Heartily, McCarthy smacks Kennedy on the back, blurting, "See? I told you he weren't no bloody German." Turning back to William, he says, "Albin, you say? If memory serves, that's Scottish or English, yeah?" "Both, actually, by way of Ireland," Kennedy grumbles. "Ireland, oh," McCarthy laughs. "See? I told you he were Irish. Now that's 2 pints you owe me." With disappointment oozing from his pores, Kennedy sighs. "Ireland? Really?" "Aye. Me ancestors hailed from Scotland and England before me grandparents landed in Ireland where I were born. And now, here I am." Shaking his head in disgust, Kennedy sighs, then holds up 2 fingers for the barkeep. Overriding him, McCarthy says, "You best make it 3. Reluctantly, Kennedy holds up a 3rd finger, and the barkeep waves with the nod. "Thanks, but you needn't order one for me," William says, stuffing his pie whole. McCarthy laughs. "Do no worry, lad. I dinna." The barkeep places 3 mugs on the table, and before she can walk away, McCarthy scoops up 2 of them and places them in front of him, 1 in each hand. Seeing his tomfoolery, Kennedy gives him a glare. "What? You owed me 2, McCarthy retorts. Turning to the young Irishman, he says, "Listen, William, we Irishmen need to look out for one another, or these bloody scoundrels will eat us alive." "'Tis true," Kennedy chirps, sipping his mug. "It is true," McCarthy echoes. Still eating, William scans the tavern, listening. "So, why are you eating alone?" Kennedy asks. William swallows, and with a glance around the room whispers, "Because I'm traveling alone." "Alone!" Kennedy blurts, bringing his partner to quickly slap a hand over his mouth. McCarthy peers over his shoulders, then turns to William in a muted voice, gasping, "Alone? Are you out your head?" William stares silently back at him. With a slap of his forehead, Kennedy grumbles, "What in blazes?" "I'm headed to Virginia. Word has it there's fertile land and opportunities to be had there." McCarthy crosses his arms, leaning back with a squint-eyed stare. "Aye, if and you make it there alive, 'cause you just never know when you'll be attacked." Bug-eyed, Kennedy leaps forward with his hands up like a boogeyman, howling, "By savages!" As he sits back, scanning the room, his partner leans forward, adding, "Or bandits. And Injuns, lad, bloodthirsty savages they be. Believe when I say, they just as soon cut your throat as eat your horse. And spit on your carcass when they're done," barks his scruffy bearded partner. Mr. Davies never mentioned savages, and now William finds himself at an unforeseen crossroad. Stone-faced, he stares at the table, contemplating his options. Return to his uncle in humiliation, or face an uncertain demise at the hands of wild savages, neither of which sounds promising. Snapping William from his daze, McCarthy asks, "Do you at least own a weapon?" William looks up from the table. "Weapon? I don't even own a horse." Slapping himself on the forehead, McCarthy chides, "Wait, you mean you're out here alone, on foot, without a weapon?" "I have a knife." "Sweet Mother Mary and Jesus! That's no good, lad. No good at all," McCarthy says, eyeballing 2 young men entering the tavern. Just then he has an epiphany, and with his eyes still fixed on the 2 newcomers, he says, "Tell me, William, have you done much in the way of hunting or trapping?" With a crinkle of his brow, he mumbles, Don't dally, lad. A simple aye or nay, if you please. William gasps. Aye, all the time on our farm in Ireland with me da and granda. Why? I'll tell you why. If you want to make it to Virginia alive, you'll be needing some companions. And as it turns out, you just might be in luck. As the two newcomers are about to sit across the room, McCarthy gets their attention, waving them over. They are local Irish hunter-trappers with whom McCarthy and Kennedy have been friends for some time. The two men stop midstream and walk over. Although Irish, they were born and raised in this region of the colonies. About the same age as William, if one did not know any better, they might mistake the three for brothers. Much like William experienced in Ireland, these two have been hunting and trapping these lands since boyhood. As such, their skills and knowledge are immeasurable, and they may just be William's ticket for a safe passage. Their names are Jonathan Brady and Jeremiah Connolly. Jonathan is a spirited lad, tall and muscular, with scrappy chestnut hair and eyes to match. His partner, Jeremiah, is of similar build, with bright blue eyes and equally scrappy, rusty red hair. But what really sets him apart from his partner is his uncanny ability to sniff out and track wild game. Like Kennedy and McCarthy, both trappers are clad from head to toe in buckskins with tall, knee-high moccasins. And while Jeremiah, like his two older friends, is wearing a furry beaver cap, Jonathan is sporting a tattered tricorn. McCarthy knows they are preparing to head out on an excursion, which is why he called them over. They will be hunting furs to trade on their way to an island trading post at the mouth of the Susquehanna. It rests in an area first explored by Captain John Smith in 1608, shortly after establishing the colony. Quote, Heaven and earth seem never to have agreed better to frame a place for man's commodious and delightful habitation. End quote. In addition to the island, Smith also encountered the river's namesake tribe, the Susquehannocks, with whom he fostered an amicable working relationship. In 1622, English adventurer Edward Palmer establishes a post on the island. From there, he trades with the local Indian tribes, exchanging goods for furs. 15 years later, Lord Baltimore finds the island to his liking and seizes control of it. Later still, in 1658, Maryland pioneer settlers establish Harmerstown there. Then, in 1785, the town becomes incorporated and is renamed Havre de Grace in honor of French General Lafayette, who, having frequented the area during the American Revolutionary War, remarked that it reminded him of Le Havre, France. But for now, the island is nothing more than a simple, albeit illegal, trading post. "Cop a squat, lads! Let me buy you a pint," McCarthy says with a two-fingered wave at the barkeep. The two men exchange a shit-eating grin and slide onto the bench next to him across from William, and Jonathan says, "If you're buying, I'm sitting." Still waving, McCarthy says, "Sit your arse down, then. There's someone I'd like you to meet. Jonathan, Jeremiah, this here's William." Simultaneously, the trappers extend a hand, echoing, "William?" With a friendly nod, William shakes their hands, replying, "Jonathan? Jeremiah?" Introductions behind them, McCarthy gets to talking. "William here's from the homeland." They nod, and Jeremiah remarks, "You don't say?" "Aye, and he's making his way to Virginia." "Aren't you lads heading to the Susquehanna?" "We are indeed. Heading out first thing in the morning, in fact," Jeremiah replies. "Well, it just so happens William here grew up on the Irish countryside hunting with his da and granda," McCarthy says, pausing for effect. Then, "Perhaps you can help each other out. An extra set of eyes on the trail, an extra pair of eyes looking out," McCarthy cleverly suggests. The two trappers exchange a look, pondering the idea, and McCarthy barks, "Well, What say you?" Turning to William, Jeremiah says, "So, Paul here says you grew up hunting with your da and granda, but how much of it have you really done?" "Enough to fill the bellies of 8 people for more than a decade." McCarthy and Kennedy roll their eyes from William to Jeremiah, nodding wide-eyed. With a hand to his chin, Jonathan asks, "So, then you can track, shoot, and dress?" "Aye, if you canna track it, you canna shoot it. And if you canna shoot it, you canna dress, skin, or eat it." Eyeballing Jonathan, McCarthy chuckles. "He has a point, lad." Soaking in his words, the trappers exchange another look before turning to William across the table. "Let me be clear. The route we follow takes us over every hill and through every valley, creek, and river from here to the head of the Chesapeake, all of which are fertile hunting lands. That will enable us to gather enough furs along the way to make the trip worthwhile. So we won't be headed towards Virginia straight away," Jeremiah says firmly. "What me hairy friend is saying is if'n you're in a hurry, this ain't for you," Jonathan clarifies. Pointing, Jeremiah firmly states, "And it'll be all about business. So there'll be no time for fiddle-farting around, understand?" Jonathan gives his partner a discerning glare, then turns to William and says, "What me overly serious red-headed friend is trying to say is, it's demanding work, and if'n you canna hold your own, you'll just be dead weight. So, with all due respect, friend, we've no the time nor the patience for dead weight." William is listening intently, staring him down, when Jeremiah chimes in, drawing his attention. "And while it's true concessions have been made with the local savages, this is still their land we're talking about. And they're no too kind to white men infringing on their sacred hunting grounds." William leans back in his chair. "Sacred hunting grounds, you say?" Leaning in, Jeremiah adds, "And know this, friend, it's no like hunting with your da." William straightens himself. "How so?" Jeremiah gives him a stank-eyed glare and says, "Because if'n you're no careful, you'll become the prey." Testing William's intestinal fortitude, Jonathan leans forward and says, "As in, you'll be dead." William stares at them unflinching, processing what he has heard. Clearly, going it alone is not the best option. He shifts his eyes to Jeremiah, then back to Jonathan. Standing, he throws back the last of his pint. Then, slamming the empty mug on the table, he says, "Any man afraid of dying is a man afraid of living." The trappers exchange a quick glance, then stand and shake William's hand enthusiastically. Slamming a palm on the table, McCarthy shouts, "Sounds like we have an accord. Barkeep, 5 more." "And you should probably know he has no horse," Kennedy slips in after the fact. Staring at Senior's hunting knife, Jeremiah asks, "Have you at least a musket to go with that knife?" "Nay, but I will. Where and when do we meet up?" "The crack of dawn, in front of the tavern," Jeremiah replies. With that, William bows and says, "Mr. McCarthy, Mr. Kennedy, I thank you for the company and the introductions. Mr. Brady, Mr. Connolly, I shall see you in the morning." "You're leaving?" McCarthy blares. "Aye, I've a musket to purchase," William shouts as he heads for the tavern door. A short while later, William is standing inside the surprisingly well-stocked, albeit cluttered, trading post. "Looking for anything in particular?" asks the proprietor. "A musket if you have one." A smile crosses the proprietor's face. "What if I told you I've something better?" "Better?" "Follow me," the man says with a wave. He leads William to the back counter, where on the wall behind a broad, flat-brimmed hat hanging from a deer rack rests something resembling an overly long musket. Pointing, the man says, "Ain't she a beauty?" "Aye, and I'm kind of partial to that hat as well," William remarks, eyes wide. As the proprietor removes the light brown hat from the rack, William's mouth falls open when the rifle is fully revealed. He hands William the hat, and he gives it a good once-over before putting it on. As William adjusts the hat into place, the man says, "It suits you, and I think it'll keep the sun off me head." Gazing up at the rifle, "Can he bring her down for a closer look?" "Of course." As he carefully climbs up to remove the heavy rifle from across the rack, he remarks, "She were invented by a German. Calls it a long rifle. She functions like your musket or Fowler, but with far greater range and accuracy." With rifle firmly in hand, he descends the ladder, handing it to William. "Wow, she's heavy." "Which is likely why I came to own it. A feller's widow gave it to me to pay her debt. According to her, the damn thing is so bloody heavy, her husband couldn't lift the barrel to fire before the bear was on top of him. To hear her tell, the only reason she got away was the bear were too busy tossing him about." "Mauled by a bear? Oh, that's a hell of a way to go." "Indeed it is. Horrible, if you ask me." "I can see why she'd want to get rid of it." "Indeed. So, what do you think?" Holding the rifle by the barrel, William lets the butt rest on the floor. "I think she's as tall as Martha, that's what I think." "So, Martha's your sweetheart, then?" William chuckles. "Hey, me last employer, Martha Davies." "I see. Well, I think it's time to take Martha out back and see how she shoots." Out behind the trading post, the proprietor demonstrates the load and hands William the rifle. Pointing, the man says, "You see that tree stump yonder? Give her a go and see if you can hit it." Adjusting his new hat, William eyeballs the stump. "That'll do." "What do you figure that is? 100? 120? "Sounds about right to me," the man replies. Lifting the barrel, William cocks the rifle, zeroing in on the stump. With the butt pressed firmly to his shoulder, he slowly lets out his breath. Stopping halfway, he eases back on the trigger. The rifle explodes with might, recoiling into William's shoulder as streams of smoke shoot from the striker and barrel. Downrange, the ball cracks against the stump, casting a torrent of splinters into the air before burying itself into the wood. Still staring downrange, he lowers the barrel. "Not bad," comments the proprietor. "Not bad at all. May I try another?" The man nods and William reloads the weapon. "What's your target?" Looking downrange, William points. "See the dead tree with the branch sticking up?" The man peers downrange, spotting the branch, and gasps, "Why, that's a good 160 yards." William smiles at him and lifts the barrel. With a spark, the rifle erupts again. Crack! Smoke blasts into the air, hurtling the ball downrange. Staring down the barrel, William watches as the branch explodes into pieces, sending a cascade of splinters in every direction. Excitedly, the proprietor shouts, "Whee, doggy! Now that's some fine shooting. Not in all me days have I seen shooting so fine. Son, you could have made that shot from 200. With a discreet grin, William replies, "Maybe." "Fair tell, you and Martha were made for each other. Inseparable, like husband and wife." Barrel in hand, butt to the ground, William gives the long rifle a good once-over. Sliding his hand along its cold steel barrel, he asks, "So, how much?" Hand to chin, the proprietor says, "Well, there'll be a few more things you'll be needing." In addition to Martha and his fancy new wide-brimmed hat, William purchases balls, powder, and other necessities for his journey ahead. His bounty from the Davies just enough to cover it all. Outside the Hog's Breath Tavern, Newark, Delaware Colony, the next morning, early spring, 1729. With a fully loaded bedroll slung over his back and Martha proudly slung over his shoulder, William stands in front of the tavern waiting for his new partners. It is early, and so is he. When his partners finally arrive, each are on foot with a loaded pack horse in tow. Spotting the rifle, Jeremiah jokes, "Holy Christ, William! We said get a musket, not a bloody cannon." "Aye, you'll be needing a bloody horse to carry that thing. What's it weigh? 100 pounds? Jonathan laughs. She can shoot the tits off a mouse at 150, William boasts with a confident grin. Me arse, Jonathan bellows. Holding out a hand, Jeremiah yelps. Want to bet on it? 10 skins. I'll be taking that bet, Jonathan barks, slapping his hand into his partner's with a hearty shake. Unshouldering Martha, William holds her by the barrel, butt to the ground, and smirks. I'm glad you could make it. For a while there, I thought I were going to have to go it alone. Morning to you as well, wise ass. Tell you true, we weren't sure we'd be seeing you again. Well, Jonathan weren't. Me, I knew you'd be here. That's 5 skins you owe me now, Jeremiah says to his old partner. Yeah, I ain't worried. I'll be earning 'em back when our friend here pretends to show us how to shoot, Jonathan yaps. Glancing at William, Jeremiah says, You said she. Aye. If she's a she, then what's her name? William glances at the rifle and says, Martha. With the finger to his chin, Jeremiah sighs. Martha, I like it. Turning to Jonathan, he says, Seems to me I'll be starting this trip out 10 skins up, thanks to William and Martha here. Like hell. Me grandma's name were Martha, and she couldn't hit the barn door with a fowler at 5 feet, and that Martha there couldn't drop a deer at 150. No one can make that bloody shot. Tits off a squirrel, Jonathan grumbles. Confidently, Jeremiah prods. We shall see. With pack horses in tow, the 3 Irish hunters depart Newark, setting off in a southwesterly direction. They come across the Christina River several hours later and cross over into Maryland. For the next several days, they follow the Christina's west branch before breaking away to follow Big Elk Creek, hunting and trapping as they go. Taking directions from his horse-pulling partners, William walks ahead of the group on point. As the trio casually make their way over the top of a small ridge, William drops to a knee holding a fist in the air, halting their advance. Curious, Jeremiah hands the reins of his horse to Jonathan and quickly moves to join William. What is it? He whispers, scanning the terrain. William points to a small clearing in the distance. Jeremiah whispers, I dinna see it. Way yonder. Squinting, Jeremiah looks again, this time spotting a beautiful North American elk, quietly grazing. With a huge smile, he swipes a hand down his face and whispers, Time to earn that bet. Just then, Jonathan joins them. Looking over William's shoulder, he peers down the barrel of his long rifle and spots the buck. Defiantly, he says, You'll never hit him. He's 200 yards out. Backing out of our bet, Jeremiah jabs. Not in a million years. This is going to be easy money. While they're busy jaw-jacking, William is zeroing in on the elk. Crack! With a squeeze of the trigger, Martha erupts, casting the 3 hunters' field of view in a cloak of white smoke. For a moment, time stands still, and a hush fills the air as they stare down range, waiting for the cloud of smoke to dissipate. Did you hit it? Jeremiah blares. No bloody way, Jonathan barks. He's down, William shouts before chasing off towards the elk. With a hand to his forehead, Jonathan sighs. There's no bloody way. Looks like I'm up 10, Jeremiah prods as he chases after William. Bloody hell, Jonathan grumbles. Then he shouts, At least we'll eat good tonight. Trapper's Base Camp, Big Elk Creek, Maryland Colony, 2 hours later, spring 1729. The nights and mornings are still colder than a well-digger's arse, so after William shoots the elk, the trio sets up a base camp near Big Elk Creek. After setting up camp and getting a fire going, they get to work on the elk, butchering it and hanging the meat in tripod smokehouses wrapped in buckskins. With most of the meat cutted to jerky, the hunters enjoy a feast of pan-fried heart and tenderloin roasted over an open fire. Savoring the fruits of their labor, they discuss their plans for running a trap line along the creek. The following day they lay out 30 beaver traps along a 5-mile stretch along the water's edge. 3 days later, they are walking their line, checking their traps. It is bitterly cold, and the creek is covered by various thicknesses of ice, with fast-flowing water just beneath the surface. "I'd be mindful of that ice along the edge there, William, lest you're in for a cold swim," Jeremiah laughs. Jonathan chuckles. "Talk about a cold bath." "In case you haven't noticed, William could use a bath," Jeremiah chides. "Me? Have you caught a whiff of yourselves lately? The only saving grace is your stench is keeping the beasts away," William jabs. "Really? You hear that, Jonathan? The Irish country boy says we're the only things keeping him safe," Jeremiah snickers. "I'm sorry, Jeremiah, but he were talking about your stench, no mine." "Who are you fooling? You're just as nasty as him." Gesturing with a hand as he walks, Jonathan mocks the aristocracy, pretending to bow. "Well, you're ever so welcome, Sir William. We are grateful to be of service. After all, we canna have you so scared that you canna sleep." "Aye, we know how important it is to get your sleep, William. So, you rest easy, little lamb. Jonathan and Jeremiah will protect you. Because if you get eaten, there'll be no one left to do our dirty work," Jeremiah jokes. "Speaking of which, one of you skunks is dressing the next kill. I've so much dried blood under me nails, I canna scratch me nose," William retorts. Just then, the ice beneath William's feet gives way, and he falls into the icy water, ass over elbows. In a flash, Jonathan and Jeremiah burst into laughter. As his companions heartily hoot, William gets to his feet, breathing heavily and shivering, kneecap deep in the frigid creek. Quickly catching his breath, he breaks for shore. "Oh, holy Christ! I cannot feel me stones!" His Irish brothers are laughing uncontrollably. Gasping for air, Jeremiah billows, "Looks like you got that bath after all, Sir William." As his words leave his mouth, the ice breaks beneath his feet, casting him backwards into Jonathan. Thrown off balance, the jokesters fall, crashing through the ice and into the drink. Although cold, wet, and numb, William burst into a belly laugh, snorting, "How funny is it now?" "Holy Christ! I canna feel me stones," Jeremiah stutters through chattering teeth. Me neither," shudders Jonathan. "You'd better check your stones, lads. For all you know, they fell off," William laughs. In a bit more serious tone, Jeremiah declares, "For the love of frozen gizzards, we'd best get back and warm up, or we'll catch our deaths." Jonathan adds, "Aye, we could check the traps after we've thawed our balls." As his partners join him on the bank, William jokes, "That may be a problem for Jeremiah. I think I saw his float away." "Forget me stones. It's the rest of me needs warming. I'm freezing," Jeremiah stammers. Considering their own stupidity, the trappers hastily slosh their way back to camp, laughing and shivering as they go, their jokes and laughter the only thing keeping them moving. Once there, they quickly remove their wet clothes, hanging them over the fire. Then, quick as their frozen bodies will allow, they layer themselves in warm, dry furs and park their frozen bodies by the fireside with hot cups of coffee. Trappers Base Camp, Big Elk Creek, Maryland Colony, 5 weeks later, spring 1729. Wisely, the Irish trio always dresses their kills in the field to keep scavengers and predators away from their camp. When not out hunting or checking their trap lines, they are in camp smoking the meat and preparing the hides for the market. One day, while processing furs, Jonathan teaches William how to harvest sinew, or silver skin, from a deer's back. "And then you cut right here, and done." "And we use this for what?" "For string," Jonathan replies, reaching into a bowl of water to retrieve a strand he prepared. After threading it onto a sewing needle, he proceeds to sew 2 small furs together. "You'll no find a stronger thread for sewing," he says, looking up at William as he sews. What are you making? A pair of watertight moose leather and beaver fur mittens. Watertight, you say? Aye, the insides will never get wet. How so? Pulling the sinew through the pelt, Jonathan says. The sinew is strong, so you can pull it real tight. And as it dries, it shrinks, tightening the stitches and making for a watertight pair of mittens or moccasins or whatever. No shite. No shite. Here, let me show you. Methodically, Jonathan demonstrates how to create a pair of mittens, from cutting the pattern to stitching it together. With each step, William follows along, closely mimicking Jonathan's actions. That looks pretty good. You're a quick study, his teacher remarks. William chuckles. I must confess, me uncle is a tailor. He taught me to sew when I was just a wee lad. Examining his understudy's work, Jonathan remarks. And he taught you well. You'll have a fine pair of mittens when you're done. A short while later, So, how'd I do? William asks, presenting the finished mittens to his teacher. Jeremiah! Jonathan shouts, waving him over. What? He snaps. William wants to know what you think of his new mittens, he says, pointing. Jeremiah walks over and snatches them from William's hand. With a critical eye, he examines them closely, turning them over to inspect both sides. As he slips them onto his hands, his once critical eye softens. William sighs. So? That's a fine pair of mittens, William. Thanks. Jeremiah grins, holding up his mitten-covered hands. Not so fast, you lazy raccoon. Make your own, Jonathan barks, snatching the mittens from his hands. Hey! Jeremiah retorts. Maybe. If you're real nice, he'll make you a pair. Jeremiah looks at William, his facial expression asking the question for him. William points to the mittens. If he likes 'em so much, he can have 'em, Jonathan retorts. But I can make another pair for myself. Jeremiah, if you want 'em, they're yours. Jonathan looks at William dumbfounded, then with some hesitation hands the mittens to Jeremiah. With a shit-eating grin, he says, Thank you. Well, you look so sad when he took 'em, I just... What? You just what? Jeremiah questions. With a shrug, William replies, Felt sorry for you. Sorry? Like what? Like a dog without a bone? A boat without a paddle? What? Hand to chin, William replies. More like a drunkard without a jug. Jeremiah laughs. A drunkard? Besides, I'd hate to think those pretty little hands of yours might get cold. Oh, that's funny, farm boy, Jeremiah chuckles. And, for the record, me hands are no little. Little hands, little mittens, Jonathan scoffs. With a raise of a finger, William says, Actually, Jonathan, I made those mittens larger than yours so they'd fit me. With a smirk, Jonathan changes the subject, grumbling. Great! He's been at me for weeks to make him a pair of those bloody things, and now I'll never hear the end of it. I'm glad you put me off. These are far better than the ones you've been making, Jeremiah teases, vigorously rubbing his mitten-covered hands together. Jonathan glares at him, getting a raised brow and a shit-eating grin for his trouble. Hey, at least you won't have to endure any more of his pestering, William breathes. Staring at Jonathan with an annoying grin, Jeremiah throws a few more jabs. Nicely done, William. These are the finest mittens I've ever seen. Ignoring the jab at Jonathan, William proudly chirps. The finest, you say? Wow, thank you. Nay, William, thank you. Best mittens ever. Moving past his friend's jabs, Jonathan praises. Nicely done, William. You're a skilled craftsman. A man can make a good living with skills like that. It didn't take long for Jonathan and Jeremiah to take a liking to their Irish-born companion. Having endeared himself to them in almost no time, the three men create a special bond, the likes of which remind William of relationships he shared in Ireland. Taking him under their wings, They teach him everything they know about the local wildlife, topography, and the natives. Jonathan even helps him craft his first pair of buckskins. In return, William shares tricks and skills he learned in Ireland while hunting with his Dawn senior. They spend hours together sitting by their evening fires, telling stories while sewing his buckskins in a new pair of knee-high moccasin boots. William tells them stories about growing up in Ireland and life on the farm. Considering Jonathan and Jeremiah's fathers, like them, had been born in the colonies, they knew very little about their ancestral home. They are fascinated by William's stories and how very different yet similar life was there. Throughout their trip, they share their stories, their jokes, and their laughter, not to mention the occasional snafu, like the broken ice. And for the next 2 months, they hunt and trap every acre of the vast frontier, from Big Elk Creek to Little Elk Creek, and every creek, river, hill, and valley in between, all while creating a unique and unbreakable bond. Island Trading Post, head of the Susquehanna River, northern Chesapeake Bay, Maryland colony, mid-afternoon on a late spring day, 1729. With their pack horses heavily loaded with deer, elk, beaver, and otter pelts, and hats, mittens, coats, buckskins, and moccasins, William and his companions traveled to where the Susquehanna River empties into the northern tip of the Chesapeake Bay. After an entire spring of hunting and trapping, the trio was bound for a secluded, illegal trading post to cash in their bounty. Upon their arrival, they sell their goods to the owner of the trading post, Irish Indian trader John Steelman, exchanging their trappings for shillings and much-needed supplies, after which each man keeps an equal share of the take. After finishing their business, they set up camp one last time and enjoy an evening of celebration. There, deep in the Maryland wilderness, the three strangers see their adventure come to an end. The following morning they break bread together one last time, during which Jonathan and Jeremiah attempt to convince William to return to Newark with them and stay on as a partner. And while William is flattered and genuinely tempted, he still has his heart set on Virginia. So after breakfast, William helps them load their horses as they prepare for their long journey home. Then, with firm handshakes and hearty hugs, the three Irish frontiersmen part ways, each promising to see the other again down the road. "Best of luck, William. I hope Virginia is all you dreamed," Jonathan says, slapping his arms about him with a bear hug. "Thanks, brother. Best of luck to you as well," William replies with 2 hearty pats on his back. As he turns, Jeremiah slaps his arms into William's, forearm to forearm, and with a firm clasp says, "Until next time, brother. And trust me when I say, there will be a next time." "I look forward to that day," William says with a squeeze. "Until then, brother." Together, they had traveled a mere 40 miles as the crow flies. While doing so, however, they climbed every hill, hunted every valley, and fished and trapped every river and creek along the way, traversing back and forth across the Maryland wilderness. The entire spring of 1729 spent trapping, hunting, fishing, camping, breaking bread, talking, laughing, and sharing stories while making a lifetime of memories. When all said and done, the 3 Irish frontiersmen who started as strangers part ways as brothers. Standing in front of the trading post, William waves goodbye, watching them as they slowly lead their horses away.